They said blood is thicker than water. I used to believe that. Until I heard my own grandson call me a burden. Until I saw my granddaughter roll her eyes when I asked for help bringing in groceries. Until the house that had once rung with laughter and birthday candles turned into a place where my footsteps made everyone uncomfortable. My name's Tom, 73 years old, widower for 5. A man who spent his life believing family was something you built with your hands and protected with your heart. My wife, Margaret, and I raised 2 kids, and when they had children of their own, I thought I'd won the lottery twice. Little feet running through the garden, sticky fingers stealing cookies from the jar. Those were the sounds of heaven to me. Now the house is quiet, too clean, too cold. And sometimes I wonder if I built it for the wrong people. It started small like most heartbreaks do. My eldest grandson, Mark, stopped visiting as much. He was busy, he said. Career, travel, some new girlfriend. My granddaughter Lily, the bright one, called only when she needed something, help with her car, money for a project, a temporary loan that never came back. I didn't mind. I was proud they trusted me. That's what grandfathers are for, right? But things changed after Margaret died. She was the heart of this house, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who laughed even when her knees hurt, who made the kids feel like every meal here was a celebration. When she left, they stopped coming around. Maybe I stopped too. For a while, I told myself it was normal. The young have their own lives, and old men are meant to fade into the background. But there's a difference between being forgotten and being erased. The day everything broke started with something simple. A birthday dinner, mine, 73. I wasn't expecting a parade, just a few faces, maybe a cake, a joke about how I was still upright. I even put on my best shirt, the blue one Margaret used to like, and waited by the window. At 6, no one came. At 7, I got a text. From Lily. Hey, Grandpa, sorry, we're at Mark's place tonight. Thought we'd celebrate you together next weekend instead. Hope that's okay. Next weekend, hope that's okay. I stared at the screen so long, it went black in my hand. I made myself dinner. 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 chair. The soup was too salty. Or maybe it was just the tears. 2 days later, I drove to Mark's apartment. I told myself I just wanted to see them. No lectures, no guilt trips, just my grandkids, my family. When I got there, music was playing, laughter. Through the open balcony doors, I could see them. Mark, Lily, and a few of their friends. Balloons, a cake, candles, 73, my number. My heart stopped. I walked inside, unnoticed for a moment, until Lily turned around, her smile freezing when she saw me. Grandpa, she said quickly, you weren't supposed to... Wasn't supposed to what? My voice cracked. Come to my own birthday? Mark stepped forward, frowning. We were going to surprise you next weekend. Tonight's just a thing with friends. Friends who happen to have a cake with my name on it. No one spoke. The air was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Lily muttered, It's not a big deal, Grandpa. You always take things so personally. That sentence cut deeper than any knife, because what else is family, if not personal? I left before anyone could stop me, drove home in silence. The candles on that cake must have burned down to nothing by the time they realized I wasn't coming back. That night, I sat in the dark living room, surrounded by memories. Margaret's knitting basket in the corner, the photo of the kids on their first Christmas. And something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I'd spent my life giving, time, money, love, advice, and they'd taken it like air. Something always there, something endless. But love isn't endless. It's earned, drop by drop, through care and respect. And when it's spent carelessly, it dries up. I wasn't angry at them, not really. I was angry at myself for letting them forget who I was, for making it too easy. So I decided to remind them, not with shouting or punishment, but with silence and truth. I was going to make them remember what it means to lose something you thought would never leave. Revenge, maybe, but it wasn't about getting even. It was about waking them up before it was too late. The plan came quietly, like a whisper from somewhere deep inside me. Maybe Margaret's voice, maybe just the ache of being invisible. They thought I was old and harmless, a relic, but they'd forgotten something important. The older a man gets, the less he has to lose. And a man with nothing left to lose can be dangerous in ways youth will never understand. That night, I opened my notebook, the one I used to write grocery lists and reminders, and wrote down the first sentence of what would become the hardest lesson of their lives. Sometimes love has to break your heart to save it. And beneath it, I drew two names, Mark, Lily. I looked at them for a long time, whispering into the quiet, "You'll remember me soon, not for the money, not for the dinners, not for the gifts. You'll remember me because I'll teach you what family really means." Then I turned off the light and began. I didn't sleep that night. The house creaked with the wind, whispering through the gaps in the old window frames. Margaret always said the house had a soul. I used to think that was nonsense, but as I sat in the dark, I swear I could feel her there. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't something cruel. I wasn't going to scream, sell houses, or throw anyone out. That's not how I was raised. But there's a kind of revenge that cuts deeper than any argument, the kind that shows people exactly what they've thrown away. I started small, stopped answering texts. When Lily finally called 3 days later, I let it go to voicemail. "Grandpa, hey, just checking on you. We didn't mean to upset you the other night. Can we come by this weekend?" I almost called back. Almost. But I knew if I did, it would end the way it always did, with me forgiving, them forgetting, and everything going back to the same hollow rhythm. So, I stayed quiet. I went about my days differently, canceled my cable subscription, donated old clothes, sorted Margaret's books, and took half to the library. I was making space, not just in the house, but in my heart, for something new. That's when the idea came to me. The letters. When Margaret was alive, she used to write little notes to everyone in the family, tucked into lunch bags, birthday cards, coat pockets. She said written words last longer than spoken ones because paper doesn't interrupt. I found a box of her old stationery in the closet, cream-colored envelopes, her initials embossed in gold. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and wrote 2 letters, one to Mark, one to Lily. Not scolding, not bitter, just honest. To Mark, I wrote about how proud I was of the man he'd become, smart, successful, confident, but how somewhere along the way, he'd confused pride with distance. "You're strong, Mark," I wrote, "but strength without compassion is just arrogance in a better suit." To Lily, I wrote about her laughter, how it used to fill this house, how she could make even Margaret laugh until she cried. "But lately," I said, "you laugh at people, not with them. And that difference, sweetheart, is the line between love and cruelty." I sealed the envelopes, placed one on each of their porches, and drove away before they came home. I didn't need to see their faces. I just wanted the words to sit there, waiting for them to be brave enough to open them. Days turned into a week. No calls, no messages, just silence. I started to wonder if I'd gone too far, if I'd become the bitter old man they whispered about at family gatherings. But then, one evening, there was a knock on my door. It was my neighbor, Emma. She's 71, with sharp eyes and a kinder soul than most. She brought over a pie, cherry, my favorite. "You've been quiet, Tom," she said, peering at me like she could read thoughts. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not," she said softly, setting the pie down. "I saw you talking to yourself in the garden yesterday." I laughed. "Maybe I was talking to Margaret." She smiled, but her eyes softened. "Maybe she's the only one who listens these days." We had pie and tea, and for the first time in months, I laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind you give to make others comfortable. When she left, she touched my shoulder and said, "Don't let silence become your punishment, Tom. Sometimes they need to see your absence to understand your worth. But don't let it swallow you whole." Her words stuck with me. That night, I went through an old photo album. Birthdays, beach trips, Christmas mornings. Every page was proof of how much I'd given. I didn't regret it. But I couldn't deny the ache that came with realizing those days were gone. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Mark. His voice was strained. "Grandpa, I got your letter. I don't know what to say. You're right, about everything. I've been selfish, I guess. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to." Then another message from Lily, tearful and small. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I just wanted to fit in with everyone. and I forgot who taught me what family even means. Please call me. For a moment, I thought that was it. The lesson landed, the story done. But there was something about their apologies that didn't feel complete. Maybe it was the timing, maybe the guilt, maybe it was just too easy. 2 days later, they showed up together. I was pruning the rose bushes Margaret had planted the year before she died. Mark was holding flowers. Lily had a box of muffins, the kind Margaret used to bake. "Grandpa," Lily said, "we came to make things right." I nodded, letting them inside. The air between us was thick with unspoken things. They talked fast, about how they'd realized they'd taken me for granted, how they missed the family dinners, how they'd been under stress. It was rehearsed, polite. I listened, smiled where I was supposed to, but somewhere deep inside, I felt a hollowness. Words are easy. Change isn't. "You know," I said finally, "your grandmother used to say sorry is like rain. It falls, it sounds nice, but it doesn't mean much if the roots are dead." Lily looked down. Mark swallowed hard. "I don't need apologies," I continued. "I need you to remember who you are, who we were." They both nodded. But I could see it, that flicker of impatience, the way young people look at time as if it's endless. When they left that evening, I stood on the porch watching their car drive away. The sunset was a bleeding orange, the kind that makes everything glow like a memory. I thought it was over. But something inside me whispered, "Not yet." Because sometimes guilt isn't enough to change people. Sometimes they need to lose what they think they'll always have. That night, I opened Margaret's notebook, the one she used for family recipes and birthdays, and found something written on the very last page, in her gentle handwriting. "If love doesn't wake them, truth will." I closed my eyes and felt her beside me, her presence as warm as sunlight through the window. "All right, love," I murmured. "Then truth it is." I knew exactly what I had to do next, and it would change everything. I woke before dawn, the kind of waking that feels like someone nudged your soul instead of your shoulder. The sky outside was bruised with gray and orange, and the air had that quiet stillness before a storm, or a confession. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and Margaret's old notebook spread open in front of me. The page I'd read last night stared back at me. "If love doesn't wake them, truth will." Truth. That word had become heavier with every year I'd lived. Truth about who I was, who I'd been, who I'd become after she died. The kids knew none of it. To them, I was just Grandpa Tom, the quiet man with the old truck and the bad knees. The one who told the same stories twice and still mailed birthday cards even when they forgot to answer. They didn't know what I'd built, what I'd lost, what I'd sacrificed for them. I'd never told them that, when the factory laid me off in the 90s, I worked nights cleaning offices to pay for their father's college tuition, or that when Margaret got sick, I sold my fishing boat, the one thing I'd kept for myself, to cover her treatment bills before insurance kicked in. They never knew how many times I'd gone without new shoes, without vacations, without sleep, just to make sure the family never felt poor. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe love that hides its own struggle teaches people to believe it was easy. So I decided to tell them the truth, not in a letter this time, but in a way they'd never forget. I called Mark first. "Morning, Grandpa," he said cautiously. "I need your help with something," I told him. "Of course. What do you need?" "I'm selling the house." Silence, then, "What? You can't—" "Grandpa, that's the family house." I smiled into the receiver. Didn't seem much like family lately. "Don't be dramatic," he said, his tone slipping into that smooth, managerial patience he used at work. "We can talk about this. I'm not asking permission, son. I'm asking for help with the paperwork." He sighed, probably rubbing his temples like he used to do when he thought I was being stubborn. "Okay, but why now?" "Because sometimes you have to let go of the walls to rebuild what's inside them." I could almost hear his confusion. "You're not making sense." "Give it time," I said softly. "You'll understand." After I hung up, I called a realtor, an old friend named Don. We'd gone to school together back when hair was thicker and dreams were simpler. He still worked out of a small office downtown. "Tom," he said, "you sure about this? That house is your life." "Exactly," I said. "And it's time to live the rest of it." By the next week, the for sale sign stood in the front yard like a flag planted on new soil. The neighbors whispered, the grandkids panicked. Lily showed up first. "Grandpa, this isn't funny," she said, stomping up the porch steps. "You can't just sell Grandma's house." "Can I?" I asked calmly. "This is where we grew up, where Mom and Dad got married." "And where you all stopped coming," I said quietly. "Memories don't keep a house warm, Lily. People do." She looked at me like I'd struck her. "Are you doing this to hurt us?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I'm doing this to wake you." That night, I sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes. Every sound echoed, the clock ticking, the crickets outside, my heartbeat. I found an old photo on the mantel, one I hadn't looked at in years. Margaret holding baby Mark, me with my arm around her, both of us smiling like we had all the time in the world. "Would you hate me for this?" I whispered. "For letting go of the house you loved?" In the quiet, I swear I could hear her laugh, that low, warm chuckle that always came before she said something wise. "Not if it saves them, Tom." The next day, Mark came storming in. "I talked to Don. You really listed it? You didn't even tell Mom or Dad?" "I didn't think they'd care much," I said. "They haven't visited in months, either." He rubbed his face, exasperated. "Grandpa, this place is worth money. You could rent it, not sell it. Keep it in the family." I looked at him. "You want to keep something in the family? Then start acting like family. Houses don't make us who we are, Mark. We do." He stared at me, torn between guilt and pride. "I just don't get it," he said finally. "You will," I said again, that same steady calm that was starting to feel less like peace and more like resolve. When they both left that night, Mark frustrated, Lily crying, I went to the attic. Dust danced in the thin moonlight. I opened an old trunk Margaret and I used to keep our keepsakes in. Inside was a worn red folder labeled The Future Fund. It was something we'd built quietly over decades, little savings from every paycheck, investment returns, bits of inheritance. Enough to secure the kids' futures long after we were gone. They didn't know it existed. I'd planned to divide it between them when I passed, maybe leave some for the great-grandkids. But as I held that folder now, a different thought struck me. What if I didn't wait? What if I used it to show them what family really meant? Not through inheritance, but through action, through something that would make them stop, look, and feel. The next morning, I drove to the bank, transferred the funds into a new account. Then I started making calls, one to a local charity for single parents, another to a small town school where I'd once taught carpentry workshops, and finally to a community center that was falling apart for lack of funding. When I hung up, I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's gratitude. I was doing something that mattered, something that felt like Margaret, but I wasn't finished, not yet. I wrote one last letter. This one wasn't for Mark or Lily. It was for all of them, my children, my grandchildren, the whole family. I sealed it in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, right next to the realtor's folder. Then I walked outside, stood on the porch, and watched the sun rise over the garden one last time. I'd planted those roses with Margaret. She used to say they bloomed better after storms. Maybe people did too. When the house sold 2 weeks later, I didn't tell anyone where I was going, just left the letter, my old keys, and a note on the front door. "Don't look for me. Find yourselves first." And as the car rolled out of the driveway, I didn't feel old. I felt alive. Because sometimes love doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go, loud enough for everyone to hear. The letter was found 2 days after I left. I know because Emma called me. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Tom, they came by this morning. The kids. They found your note. They're not taking it well." I could imagine it. The front door swinging open, my empty chair by the window, the faint smell of Margaret's lilac perfume still lingering in the curtains. My world suddenly hollow. "I told them you were okay," Emma said softly. "That you just needed space." "Thank you," I said. "They'll be angry for a while. That's all right. Anger is the first step to understanding." After I hung up, I sat on the porch of the small cabin I'd rented by the lake, the same one Margaret and I used to visit on anniversaries. The air smelled of pine and rain. I hadn't felt this peaceful in years. Still, I couldn't help picturing their faces as they read the letter I'd left behind. my family. If you're reading this, it means the house is no longer mine. Maybe that hurts to hear, but the truth is it stopped being ours a long time ago. I don't blame you. Life gets busy. We forget where we came from because we're too busy running toward where we think we're supposed to be. But every Sunday dinner missed, every unreturned call, every half-hearted visit, those are small cracks that turn into distance. This house was built with more than bricks. It was built with nights your grandmother and I stayed up worrying about bills, with birthday mornings where we wrapped presents in newspaper because we couldn't afford wrapping paper, with love that never asked for anything in return. I wanted you to remember that, to feel what we felt, not through comfort, but through loss. You'll find a folder in the desk drawer labeled The Future Fund. It isn't there anymore. I used it to do something your grandmother and I always dreamed of, building a workshop at the old community center, where kids can learn trades and single parents can rebuild their lives. People who still understand what it means to depend on one another. You might call it foolish. Maybe it is. But family isn't about inheritance. It's about legacy. And legacy isn't money. It's memory, kindness, and decency. Don't look for me. I'm not lost. I just needed to remember who I am, away from who you think I was. When you're ready to remember, you'll find me where love began, by the lake. Grandpa Tom. When Emma read the last line to me over the phone, she sniffled. Tom, it's beautiful. Cruel, maybe, but beautiful. It's not meant to be cruel, I said quietly. It's meant to heal what I can't say anymore. Back in town, the reaction was mixed. My son, David, called me first. Dad, what are you thinking? He barked. Selling the house, disappearing like that? You scared everyone half to death. I told you where to find me, I said. That's not the point. Then what is? You can't do this. You're punishing them. No, David, I said, calm but firm. I'm teaching them. He exhaled sharply, his frustration hitting me through the static. You always think you know best. Not always, I said softly. But I know what it feels like to be forgotten. Maybe now they'll know too. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, in a smaller voice, he said, Mom would have stopped you. Maybe, I said. Or maybe she would have handed me the car keys. That made him hang up. For the next week, the world stayed silent. Then, one afternoon, I heard tires crunching on the gravel road outside my cabin. A silver car rolled to a stop. Lily stepped out first, then Mark. Both looked older than they had 2 weeks ago. Lily's eyes were red. Mark's jaw was set, his anger worn thin by exhaustion. You really did it, he said, looking around. You really just left. I nodded. You found the letter? We found everything, Lily whispered. The donation receipts, the photos you left, the house empty. Grandpa, why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked. Her lip trembled. You think we're monsters or something? I sighed. No, I think you're young. And I think youth is a kind of blindness that only loss can cure. Mark crossed his arms. You think selling the house fixes that? It's not about fixing, I said. It's about remembering. You can't heal what you refuse to feel. For a long moment, no one spoke. The lake shimmered behind them, golden with sunset. Then Lily stepped closer. Grandpa, I read your letter 3 times. I didn't understand it the first time. The second time, I got angry. But the third time, her voice broke. The third time I cried, because I realized I never asked what your life was like. I never asked what you needed. I felt my throat tighten. You don't owe me anything, sweetheart. I do, she said fiercely. We both do. Mark looked away, blinking hard. You gave up everything for us, didn't you? I smiled sadly. That's what love is. It's giving and not keeping score. He nodded slowly, as if trying to swallow a truth that wouldn't fit. So what now? Now, I said, you live your lives, you visit people before it's too late, you tell the ones you love that they matter. You remember that family isn't just a word you use on holidays. Lily reached out and took my hand. Come home, Grandpa. I am home, I said quietly, looking at the lake. This place, this peace, it's where I belong for now. Tears welled in her eyes. But what about us? You'll be fine, I said. You've got hearts good enough to find your way back. We stood there for a long time, the three of us, the air heavy with everything unspoken. When they finally drove away, I watched their car until it disappeared beyond the trees. I thought that was the end of it. The lesson learned, the wound closed. But the next morning, I found something on the porch, a small wooden box, hand-carved, with my name etched on top. Inside was a note in Lily's handwriting. "We're rebuilding, Grandpa, together, for you." And beneath it, a single key, to the new community workshop. I held that key for a long time, my heart full and aching. Margaret would have been proud, but life wasn't done surprising me yet. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to the cabin. A man in a suit stepped out. "Mr. Thomas Green." "That's me." He smiled politely. "I'm from the county's Community Development Office. We'd like to talk about your donation. There's a proposal you might want to hear." Something in his tone made me sit up. "Proposal?" "Yes, sir," he said. "It seems your grandchildren have been working with local families. They've started something. In your name." I felt the world tilt a little. "In my name?" He nodded. "The Green Family Foundation." For the first time in a long time, I couldn't find my words. I looked out at the lake, the water calm as glass, and whispered to the wind, "You did it, love." They woke up. But deep down, I knew this story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because forgiveness is never the end. It's the beginning of what comes after. And I had one more truth to face. The county official stayed longer than I expected. His shoes were too polished for the dirt road leading up to my porch, but he didn't seem to mind the dust. He laid a folder on my table, neat and formal, filled with blueprints and letters. "Your grandchildren have been busy," he said, smiling like he knew the story already. "They took your donation and multiplied it. Matched funds with local businesses, found volunteers, partnered with the community college. The workshop is nearly finished, but they want you to open it." I stared at him, not trusting my voice. "They did all that?" "Yes, sir. They said it was your dream, and theirs now too." When he left, I sat there a long time, hands trembling slightly. Outside, the lake rippled with the soft wind, sunlight skipping across it like laughter I used to hear in the kitchen. I reached for Margaret's notebook, the last page marked with her old handwriting. If love doesn't wake them, truth will. She was right, as always. But what she hadn't told me, what I was only just learning, was that truth has a way of turning back on you too. It wakes you, even when you'd rather stay asleep. That night, I dreamed of her. She stood in the garden, young again, the sun in her hair. "You've done your part," she said, smiling that soft smile that always meant the argument was over before I started it. "Have I?" I asked. "You showed them what matters, but Tom, don't forget to show yourself." When I woke, there were tears on my face and morning light spilling through the curtains like forgiveness. 2 days later, I drove back to town. I hadn't been there since the sale. The streets looked smaller, the houses cleaner, but the ghosts were all the same. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter the closer I got to the community center. When I turned the corner, I stopped the car and just stared. Where there had once been cracked pavement and faded paint, now stood a bright new building with a wooden sign out front. The Green Family Workshop, built by hands, fueled by love. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My eyes blurred. People were gathered outside, children, parents, teachers, and standing in the middle of them were Mark and Lily, both holding clipboards and laughing as they directed volunteers. When they saw me, everything stopped. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Mark froze mid-sentence. Then they both ran toward me like children again, the way they used to when they were small and life was simpler. Lily threw her arms around me first. "You came. I had to see what kind of miracle you pulled off," I said, voice rough. Mark clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We didn't pull it off, Grandpa. You did. You started it. We just followed the map." Inside, the workshop smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. Rows of benches lined the room, tools neatly hung on new pegboards. In one corner, there was a plaque on the wall with my name, and Margaret's, dedicated to Thomas and Margaret Green, whose hands built more than walls, they built hearts. I traced the engraving with my fingers. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I whispered, "She would have loved this." Lily nodded. "We know. That's why we called it a family workshop, not a memorial. It's supposed to keep growing, like you always said families should. I looked around, watching kids sanding bits of wood, parents helping them measure, laughter mixing with the hum of machines. It wasn't just a building, it was alive. Mark led me to the back room. We wanted to show you something else. He pointed to a small photo wall they'd made, pictures of our family through the years. At the top, a faded black and white photo of me and Margaret on our wedding day. Beneath it, generations, our kids, grandkids, birthdays, dinners. And right in the center, my last note, the one I'd left taped to the door. Don't look for me. Find yourselves first. Under it, Lily had written in marker, "We did." Something inside me cracked open. Not the kind of breaking that hurts, but the kind that lets the light in. I turned to them. "You didn't just find yourselves," I said quietly. "You found what I lost." Lily smiled through tears. "We found you too." The mayor gave a little speech, people clapped, cameras flashed, and before I knew it, they were handing me a pair of scissors to cut the ribbon. My hands shook as I raised them. "This isn't just my dream," I said, voice echoing in the new hall. "It's our second chance." The ribbon fell. The crowd cheered. Afterward, as the sun dipped low and everyone packed up, Mark sat beside me on the steps outside. The orange light stretched long across the pavement, catching in the dust. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "I was angry when you left. I thought you'd given up on us." "I did," I said. "For a while." He frowned. "Why?" "Because I wanted you to see how easy it is to lose something you take for granted. I had to make you feel it, just like I did when you forgot me." He nodded slowly. "I hated you for it." "I know. But now, I get it." We sat there in silence, two men with the same jawline and too many unspoken words between them. Lily came out with 3 cups of lemonade and sat on my other side. "So what now?" she asked. I smiled. "Now you run this place, teach the next generation what love looks like when it's built with hands instead of words." "And you?" she asked softly. "I'll stay for a while," I said. "Maybe teach a class or two. Maybe just sit in the corner and watch." "Grandpa?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for leaving." That made me laugh, a deep, warm sound that felt like home. "You're welcome, sweetheart." That night, I lay in the cabin bed for the first time in months without feeling alone. The moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the edge of Margaret's photo on the nightstand. "I did it," I whispered. "They're home." But as I closed my eyes, her voice seemed to drift through the room again, soft, loving, but carrying one last question. "And what about you, Tom? When do you come home?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one was coming, because sometimes the hardest forgiveness to find is your own. It had been 3 months since the workshop opened. Every Saturday, the smell of sawdust and glue filled the air, the kind of smell that stays in your clothes and reminds you of creation. The laughter of children bounced off the walls, bright and real. Lily ran the art room, teaching kids to paint with old brushes. Mark handled the tools, showing teenagers how to build benches and bird houses. And me? I sat near the back window most days, a mug of coffee in hand, carving little wooden hearts. Not for sale, just for the joy of it. I left them on benches and shelves, tucked into toolboxes, the way Margaret used to hide love notes in coat pockets. They always found them, and every time they did, they smiled like they'd rediscovered something sacred. Still, there were quiet nights when the noise faded and the ghosts came back. Margaret's laughter, her humming while she cooked, the warmth beside me in bed that had been gone too long, the kind of emptiness that even love from others can't fill. One evening after class, I locked up and sat on the steps outside the workshop. The sky was lavender and gold, the air soft with spring. Lily came out with her hair tied back, paint on her cheek. "Grandpa, you're still here?" "Just thinking," I said. "About what?" "About how everything I thought was ending was really just beginning." She smiled and sat beside me. "You know, sometimes I still feel guilty for how we treated you." I shook my head. "Don't waste your time on guilt. Learn from it, then let it go. The past can't hurt you unless you live there." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We missed you so much." "I was never far," I said quietly, "just waiting for you to see me again." The next morning, Mark found me in the workshop early, polishing an old hammer that had belonged to his father. "Grandpa, the mayor wants to name this place after you officially," he said. "Put up a big sign, Thomas Green Center for Community Learning." I laughed. "That's too much. This isn't about me." "It is," he said. "None of this would exist without you." I shook my head. "No, Mark. It exists because you finally remembered what family means. Don't ever let my name outshine that." He smiled. "You know, you're impossible to argue with." "I've had 73 years of practice," I said, and he laughed, that deep, full laugh I hadn't heard since he was a boy. Later that week, I returned to the lake cabin. The season was changing, and so was I. My reflection in the water looked softer somehow. Older, yes, but lighter too. The kind of face that's finally made peace with itself. I took out Margaret's notebook one last time. The cover was worn now, the pages filled with her handwriting and mine. At the very back, I added one more line beneath hers. "If love doesn't wake them, truth will. And when truth heals them, peace will find you." I closed it gently and set it on the nightstand. The next morning, I woke early. The world was quiet except for the wind whispering through the pines. I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and watched mist rise from the lake like breath from a sleeping giant. The kind of morning that feels like a goodbye and a beginning at the same time. A car pulled up around mid-morning, Lily's old blue sedan. She stepped out with Mark, both carrying picnic baskets and folding chairs. "You didn't think we'd let you eat alone, did you?" she called. I chuckled. "You two never quit." "Never again," Mark said, setting up chairs near the water. We ate sandwiches, told stories, and laughed until the wind carried our voices across the lake. I looked at them, my grandchildren, my greatest heartbreak, my greatest lesson, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. When the sun began to set, I took a slow walk to the dock. The boards creaked beneath my boots. The light shimmered like liquid gold on the water. I thought about all the things I'd built and all the things I'd let go of. Loss, I realized, isn't the opposite of love. It's proof of it. You don't grieve for what never mattered. Behind me, Lily's voice called softly. "Grandpa, come back. The food's getting cold." "In a minute," I said, watching the horizon. I could almost hear Margaret beside me, her voice warm and teasing. "You did good, Tom. You can rest now." "I'm not ready to rest," I whispered, "but I am ready to live again." The wind rippled across the lake, carrying her laughter somewhere just out of reach. When I turned back, the sight of my grandchildren waiting by the fire pit, their faces glowing, the workshop key hanging from Lily's neck, made something inside me settle for good. They were my legacy. Not the house, not the money, not even the lessons I'd tried to teach. Them, their hearts, the way they had learned to love again. I walked back slowly, the fading sunlight wrapping everything in gold. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. I was still here, alive, home, and in the quiet between the waves and the laughter, I heard Margaret's voice again, soft, smiling, proud. "You brought them back, love." I smiled up at the glowing sky. "No," I whispered, "they found their way." Then I sat down with my family, the fire crackling, the stars coming out one by one, and for the first time since she'd gone, I felt whole. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't something you give, it's something you live.